Hi, everybody. I'm Frank Stanisci of Candid Frank Live, where you'll find us airing our views here on the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV. Channel 250, please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on Candid Frank Live, joining me is Aaron William Freeland. Hey, Aaron, how you doing, bud?
Doing all right, Frank. How are you?
Oh, I love computers. I love computers.
I
Life
must say,
sucks.
technology is sometimes the bane of my existence, but you seem to be going through it today, bud.
Oh, unbelievable, unbelievable. You know what? It is what it is, and we'll try to, how shall I put this? Plow through, uh, bull our way through to make sure that we can talk about some of the topics we like to talk about, like the Canadian Football League. And I got to say, looking forward, Aaron, to going to the Grey Cup.
Oh, for sure. That is, one of those things that I've always said that I'd like to try to get out to, but haven't managed to yet. Be it a combination of flight and hotel, or lack of funds, or really just a lack of time. It
The
always seems to come at a really inconvenient time of year for me, because of the industry that I work in. Everything's ramping up for the Christmas season, so
The good news is that it's in BC, it's further away, but the cost to fly is not as much. Unfortunately, that cost that you don't pay flying to British Columbia to Vancouver um, is a tick up as far as hotels are concerned. So the hotel, but if you go to a place like Saskatchewan, you go to Regina, the hotels and the flight is very expensive. Living in Toronto, Hamilton's a great bet for you if they have it in Hamilton. Even Ottawa would be great. But I think you would truly enjoy, since you are bilingual, you would really enjoy a Grey Cup in Montreal. I recommend. Those are the things I'm going to say to you about this that I think are relevant for someone like yourself who may be concerned with cost, which you don't stand alone. I'm with you.
thank goodness for that. It is unfortunately one of the biggest impediments to this sort of thing is the whole cost of travel. Unfortunately, they tend to have us by the short and curlies when it comes to that sort of thing. But if I start planning a couple of years in advance, and I know where it's going to be a couple of years in advance, I can set myself up nicely for success that way.
But relatively speaking, going to a national championship and taking part in whatever's going on, right? There, see? Now Outlook just gave me a little warning. It said provide your password to use. So I was having trouble with my email account, my Candid Frank email account, and now
Hmm.
it's telling me it wants me to provide it my password because for some reason it no longer has it. Um, and I got to tell you, that specifically is the problem I'm having because Aaron and I communicate by email as far as the script of the show is concerned. And I spent about 5, 6 minutes trying to access the email, trying to put it on my computer so I could look at it and look like Aaron and I are doing this all off the cuff so that there's no sort of written script to follow through on. It's just a question of, what pops into my head. Oh, let's talk about the Canadian Football League. And why don't we talk about the Elks Trey Ford? And he'll probably be starting Thanksgiving Day weekend. With the Elks now out of the playoffs, they can afford to try some stuff. They've got to figure out the team and what it should look like next year now. Now they're looking at players this year in the context of next year. And that's something that makes things very interesting. Aaron, so Trey Ford, will he start? Why?
Well, Jarius Jackson has said that Trey would be starting as they're facing the Stampeders on Saturday. Jared Doge will serve as the backup, while McLeod Bethel Thompson won't be dressing. Um, you know, the, this is the first time in, what did we say it was last time, Frank? 78 years, they've
Since
been without Calgary and Edmonton since
since
1940 something.
1945.
Yeah. So this is a perfect opportunity for the Elk and for the Stamps to sort of fiddle with their lineups and see. see what they can figure out. It
And
is
what they got.
obviously the battle of the toilet bowl. The Elks and the Stamps are going to be playing each other on October 12th. Both teams from Alberta are currently on the outside again for the first time since 1941. So this is one of those special situations that a lot of other fans treasure, just because you know the Elk and the Stamps have been so successful in the past. So it's nice for some of us to see them on the outside looking in.
I guess this is your way of saying the teams and their fans feel like crap.
Yeah, I don't envy them their position, but every once in a while, suffering is good for the fan's soul.
It's terrible subject matter. But in in, in fan parlance, you know, um, the word "suck" comes to mind, and for fans, that's the word a lot of times they use for opposition that they don't respect at all, and sometimes they use it for their own team. And I think that word is too strong, um, but fans have a right to voice their opinion as long as they don't get personal like that, and attack individuals as if to suggest if it wasn't for this one guy, if it wasn't for this one guy, whether it be the coach, the general manager, the quarterback, the defensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator, that one guy is the reason why we're losing. There's only one person that you can point at and actually have some accuracy, and that is ownership. Ownership is responsible for hiring the point man, the person who leads the charge. And if they make the wrong decision there, everything else won't fall into place. In fact, it'll fall apart. So Edmonton changed their ownership and changed their general manager and president, I guess he was then, of the team. And now they're on a new path. And hopefully their quarterback Ford, if he hadn't have got injured, I truly believe, Aaron, that they would have had a better chance to make the playoffs.
No, I honestly, if and that's, I mean, you can say that a lot about a lot of sports teams these days.
Absolutely.
If so and so was healthy, it wouldn't have happened. But look, to get to a record of 5-11-0, or in Calgary's case, 4-10-1, it's not just one person. You have to work together collectively to be that bad.
That's
So
a team effort to not play well
yes,
because they're in fact, if half the team is playing well, half the time, you're probably about average, right? But if you can't play well most of the time, and if most of the team can't play well, the playoffs are going to be hard to achieve. And but that doesn't I shouldn't poo-poo the idea that quarterbacks are important, coaches are important, general managers are important. They definitely are. They carry more that can be improved with the team than some other people on the team, like the defensive back. The border defensive back isn't going to stop the team from making the playoffs. It's
no.
more than that. So, well, hopefully the Elk can finally figure things out. The good news is they played much better at the last half of the season. I guess, Aaron, for them, it's what they decide to do now and what they see now and what they see in the offseason when they start next year. It's how they start next year that will be the telling tale, right? We can talk about the moves they make, we can talk about the players they try, but it all comes down in pro sports. It seems more and more because of the high competitive level, how you start your season and how you play in the beginning of your season can determine success versus failure.
I mean, at this point, both Edmonton and Calgary have to be looking at their games remaining as a 2 and 3 game mini camp. This is
Absolutely.
this is a time for a serious evaluation for them. Um, but you're correct in that how they come out of the gate is the most important thing. And
Got to be ready.
yep, you always have to be ready.
Yep, get ready to play. Start on time. The Lions Inc. Former Dallas Cowboy Tyler Coyle.
Yeah. So Coyle, who's 6'1", 215, has spent training camp in the 2024 season with the Green Bay Packers and the Cleveland Browns. He's a defensive back, and he's on now currently on their practice roster. He's originally from Windsor, Connecticut. He signed with the Dallas Cowboys as a non-drafted free agent in 2021 and appeared in 3 games with the team over 2 seasons, racking up 8 tackles and playing a role on both defense and special teams. It'll be interesting to see how he handles the shift. especially to the game up north. But I'm actually looking to see if he can bring something to the team because it should be interesting to watch him develop. Hopefully, he'll get into more games than he did in the NFL, playing in the CFL. There's only 2 games left in the season, and he is on the practice roster, so he may not necessarily see any time this year. But if he sticks with the team, we should see him playing next year.
Let's talk about the Redbacks and Lewis Ward being. Sorry.
Not a problem. The Red Blacks have actually signed national kicker Lewis Ward to a 3-year contract extension. Um, Lewis has been a model of consistency and excellence, and his position as a captain of the Red Blacks speaks to the leadership he brings to the locker room. This is coming from Bob Dice, who's actually very high on him. Um, he's very glad that he's actually had the second highest field goal percentage of his career at 88.2% this year, highlighted by a 54-yarder that stands, I believe, tied for his all-time rec second longest. And he's got a trio of walk-off game winners. His 48 made field goals currently sits tied for second in the CFL, one back of the league lead. So
I believe it's Toronto and Calgary and Ottawa for the Grey Cup. Lewis Ward was working for security.
yes, as far as I recall, I think you're right.
I mean, and now he's the captain of the team, right? Good kicker, good guy, local guy, very, very happy to be a Red Black, and carries that that logo with pride, and that's always good to see. The Stampeders add former NFL quarterback PJ Walker.
Yeah, Walker has played 21 NFL games between 2020 and 2023 and made 9 starts, 7 with the Panthers and 2 for the Cleveland Browns. He completed 185 of 339 passes for 2,135 yards and 6 touchdowns while rushing 31 times for 80 yards. He actually played with the XFL's Houston Roughnecks and led them to a 5-0 record in 2020 and was leading the league with 1,338 passing yards and 15 touchdowns when everything collapsed because of COVID. Uh, he was the MOP in the 2016 American Athletic Conference Championship, which was a 34-10 win for a Temple over Navy, and he was the first Temple quarterback to lead the school to multiple bowl game appearances. So good for that. Glad to see that they're bringing a little more experience in. It's obviously not going to help them this year, but again, as I mentioned, this gives them a little bit of an extended training camp for them to evaluate him and see where they can go forward with this.
Aaron Argo's at a Canadian.
Yeah, they signed Simon Chavez. He's a Canadian long snapper. So this could make things more interesting. He spent time with the Red Blacks and the Elks this season. The former Guelph Griffin also had stints with the Red Blacks and Blue Bombers in 23 and 22, respectively. Chavez played 33 games at Guelph, recording 12 tackles as a linebacker. He was a second-team OUA All-Star in wrestling as well. The Argos are going to be traveling to Winnipeg this weekend to face the Blue Bombers. Kickoff is Friday at 8:30. I don't know if Chavez is going to be in the lineup, but we'll be keeping an eye on that for you for sure.
Let's go over to NASCAR, and we've got a story here of interest, and that is 23XL and front row file for injunction to race in 2025. They
Yeah.
don't like their suspension, huh?
Well, the 2 teams have actually filed an antitrust lawsuit against NASCAR.
Ooh.
Yeah, so this is huge because we're talking Michael Jordan is one of the owners. Now, Front Row and 2311 filed a preliminary injunction to allow the 2 teams to race as chartered entries in the NASCAR Cup Series in 25. The reason why they were filing it is because FRM and 23XI are the only 2 teams that didn't sign the franchising agreement before an early September deadline. There are 13 other chartered teams who did sign on to the agreement. But the issue is it costs approximately $18 million per season just to field a car. And that doesn't include driver salary, transport, engineering, wind tunnel testing, everything else that goes along with that. When Stuart Haas left NASCAR, or said they were leaving NASCAR at the end of the season, their racing charters actually sold for between $20 to $25 million, and they've got more than a few entries in there. So you're looking at $50 to $75 million for the people that wanted to buy their charters. This is to guarantee yourselves a spot, but it kind of locks out lower teams, lower ranked, lower funded teams, it creates a monopoly for all of the big boys at the top and squeezes out a lot of the smaller racing teams.
Well,
So
in other words, the more money you have, the more
yeah,
you get to participate at the level that it takes actually to participate. Because if you don't win, you're not in the black, you're in the red.
very much so. It's a very, very expensive sport. Not as expensive as F1, but very expensive.
Well, regardless, if you're driving in a sea of red pavement,
Yeah,
it's
it's very
it
hard to get ahead.
absolutely, absolutely, and then competition. If you it's just I know it sounds obvious. If you don't win, you can't win. Basically, is what we're talking about here. And if you can't enter in a way that gives you an opportunity, yeah, these are the problems that you have. But when the people are in charge, nobody wants to give up the advantage they have, Aaron, and that's what this
Yeah.
comes down to. It's actually a reflection of life, isn't it?
Yeah, really, the haves
It's a
continue
bit
to
of a
have, and the
reflection.
have-nots continue to not.
There you go. Okay, let's talk and go into the NFL, and we'll talk about the Jets. And we talked about how an individual might be able to change the fortune of a team. Well, the New York Jets are thinking that parting ways with Robert Saleh will give them an opportunity to change the direction they're in. A lot of disappointed Jets fans.
Yeah, I mean, Saleh didn't have the best record with the Jets in the first place. Um, while with Rodgers injuring himself 4 plays into the last season and playing themselves into a 2-3 record so far this year. I guess management finally decided it was time for a change. So Saleh is out the door. Now they're going to have to find a new head coach, maybe a new general manager, and a few new players. Jeff Ulbrich um, is going to be taking over. Um, Aaron Rodgers is back for 2025. Well, might be. He hasn't been confirmed yet. But this might actually be the start of a rebuild. Um,
Yep. We're not talking the short form for Tiffany or the Toronto International Film Festival. There's a tiff going on, and it has to do with the quarterback. And I think that's part of what took down this general manager, where they really have to get things together. And again, this is where individuals can have a big impact on a team. In this case, Jets fans they deserve better. They've been on the cusp there. They looked like, hey, maybe, and then they brought in a certain quarterback, and the team has kind of found ways to flub things, huh?
I'm not saying that the problem could potentially be an older quarterback who is probably tarnishing his legacy at this point, but it could potentially be that their problem is a quarterback who is potentially tarnishing his legacy.
Well, I don't think he's tarnishing it anymore. I think his legacy has been established.
Fair.
And that's the problem. Okay, Raptor star RJ Barrett of the Toronto Raptors, of course. He's out for the preseason because of a sprained AC joint.
Yeah, the acromyoclavicular joint or AC joint
Okay.
is what is the issue. The team announced that he injured it on Tuesday. He's going to be missing the final 4 preseason games and will be reevaluated again ahead of the season opener. It's unclear if the injury will carry over into the start of the season or how much time he's going to miss. But unfortunately, he went down in the Raptors' 125-98 win over the Wizards on Sunday while trying to work around a screen sent by Jonas Valanciunas. The Wizard was called for an offensive foul on the play as he was hit hard in the shoulder, but he left the game shortly after that. Now, he did finish the night with a team high 17 points while shooting 7 of 10 from the field at only 14 minutes played. But the Raptors are probably going to miss his 21.8 points and 6.4 rebounds that he averaged for them last season. So we'll have to see how it goes. He is currently in the second year of a 4-year, $107 million deal. So to say that this is a bit of a loss is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, we're talking almost 27 million a year.
Yeah.
That's a lot of change, buddy. That's a lot of film cans full of change. Let's talk about the National Hockey League. And oh my, all of a sudden there's interest in discussing long term injured reserve, Aaron. What's going on? What's the concern?
Well, you remember the 2021 playoffs and how
Hmm.
how the Habs uh, beat the Maple Leafs in the first round after barely
Mhm.
squeaking into the playoffs, and then swept the Jets and beat the Vegas Golden Knights. Um,
Mhm.
I think the issue that we had here is that uh, because of the long-term injured reserve rules, the Lightning managed to be $18 million over the
Mhm.
$81.5 million salary cap, which doesn't
Mhm.
count in the postseason. Tampa Bay forward Nikita Kucherov missed the entire 56-game schedule following hip surgery, but was apparently ready for game one of the playoffs miraculously. He went on to finish first in scoring that spring and early summer, won the Conn Smythe as postseason MVP, and helped the Lightning secure their second straight Stanley Cup.
Mhm.
But his $9.5 million salary hadn't counted against the cap during the season, along with other LTIR moves. That allowed Tampa to massage its roster in ways that likely wouldn't have been possible otherwise. It did seem like Tampa was picking up an awful lot of injured players that season. So,
Yeah, and of course, because, now that the Leafs are being called into question, it's becoming a real concern.
well, if the Maple Leafs are doing it, then Tampa Bay must have done something right.
Well, you know what? If you're okay, I don't know this for a fact, but if it looks like a team is faking injuries because faking an injury till a certain time, and then realize, "Oh, he just happened to be healthy when the playoffs started." If you believe that, then there's no problem here. But if you're a conspiracy conspiracy person and you go, "What a coinky dink. He's okay now that the playoffs started. He's their best player, and now he's playing in all the contracts they were able to bring in, after the trade deadline." Because when you make trades at the trade deadline, none of those players count against the cap. You can play with those guys, no problem, right? They don't affect the cap. And then you bring in a guy that was injured, right? And if you did have him and he could have played before the trade deadline, then you've got a different situation. So whatever the league decides, whatever. As long as the problem I have with any rules, any league, anything in general, it's when the rules change on a dime. You know,
Yeah.
when rules are a certain way and they're just constantly like that, and they just keep going, no problem. I'm okay with that. It's when the rules all of a sudden, well, I think we're getting nervous about these rules now. It just makes you wonder, right? It just makes you wonder, especially in the middle of a season. You know,
Oh, for sure.
figure it out at the beginning of the year. Make it ironclad if you have to. If the Leafs are cheating, they shouldn't be allowed to. If Tampa Bay cheated, you can't take the Stanley Cup away from them. You can only basically inject a little bit of tarnish on their Stanley Cup, but you're not going to take it away from them. Hopefully, they come up with something that makes people feel like there's a level playing field, because ultimately that's what they always talk about, but there isn't a level playing field anyway, Aaron. This is a minor issue. The real issue is some teams, when they pay a player, that player keeps more money playing there than he does playing somewhere else. So in other words, some teams are playing with more money and not being punished for using that money because technically it has to do with taxes.
Yep. And honestly though, everything that has been done so far is not against the long-term injury reserve rules. So, if teams can use that to their advantage, similar to the tax situation, I don't see why they wouldn't take advantage of it.
Yeah, I really think they should factor in the tax situation, because if they really are serious, if the National Hockey League is serious, that every team have the same budget, right? Everybody can pay everybody the same amount, then you know, then it becomes a level playing field. But if you ignore advantages that some teams have, for example, just to make this a longer topic, if you're a rich team, let's say like New York, Toronto, Montreal, Chicago, LA, and you were allowed to offer as part of their payment commercials where they could get a sponsor, like in Canada would be like a Canadian Tire, in the U.S. would be, I don't know. I'm not a big Papa John's pizza. I don't know. I think you get my point, right? And the teams that are not as in big cities like the others, they would have a disadvantage. But they're saying already that you can have an advantage. It's just which advantage do you have? And when the Leafs originally brought Tavares over, there was talk that they were going to help pay him by getting a contract for him with Canadian Tire, and that would be part of his pay. And the league immediately jumped with both feet on that idea. And in the middle of the Leafs trying to work that deal out, they were told, "No, you're not. You're not doing that. It's an unfair advantage." Which unfair advantage to me, that's a very, in quotes, unfair advantage.
Well, I mean, you look at how quickly some guys ended up with soup deals
Exactly.
for endorsements, and stuff with Tim's. Seem to remember one player, because his nickname was Cookie Monster, picking up a deal with Tim Hortons within weeks of signing in Toronto. I also
And
remember,
there was a guy named Soup. His nickname was Soup.
yep, hey, who funnily
He's
enough,
in Chicago now.
yep, it ended up getting a deal with Campbell's. Why? Because in a random interview, he said, "I like soup." So
And if you say I like soup in a big city, a center, if you will, advertisers go, opportunity.
for sure.
And the league goes, we don't like that opportunity. It's okay if teams pay less taxes, players pay less taxes playing for a team, but they can't benefit because a team is in a big city. I just think that's unfair. If you're gonna say advantage okay in one way, then you have to say, like, the whole point being that the reason why big cities in big states and big provinces pay more in tax, because that's what happens in those places. In the smaller centers, where places like Florida, Nashville, other places where the tax base is a little lower, you get an opportunity to make more money if you go there. And then you have the additional wonderful thing about the game's not as popular there, so you get to play for more money and do it quietly with hardly anybody bothering you, because you can walk down the street, nobody knows who you are.
Until you get successful,
Yeah,
and
but
then it's time
still,
to find another smaller market team to try to work your magic
yeah.
with.
Well, essentially, that's what you have to do. You have to find a smaller market team. Let's talk about the Kraken.
So this is really awesome news, actually. Um, Jessica Campbell has become the first female NHL assistant coach, which is great news. The Seattle Kraken actually hired Campbell in July, making her the first female full-time assistant coach behind the bench in NHL history. Um, uh, she actually got a lot of applause when she was introduced at Climate Pledge Arena on Tuesday. She took her place during the Kraken's season opener against the St. Louis Blues. This was an afternoon game, so it was on at 4:30 Eastern. Um, it's one of those really neat things. Campbell actually drew up the play on the bench as Seattle tried to tie the game, but they unfortunately ultimately lost to the Blues 3-2. Um, Head coach Dan Bilsma was actually very happy because it's fantastic for the game, and it helps spread awareness. She's only 32. Potentially, she has a very long future in this league. Hopefully, she'll be able to make the ranks based on merit all the way up to head coach. I think she can
Absolutely.
do it.
Well, she's on the path, right?
Mhm.
Let's talk about the Montreal Canadiens, and they assigned 4 players to the Rocket de Laval.
So as we're paring everything down, the Montreal Canadiens actually sent down Joshua Roy, Adam Engstrom, Jacob Dobas, and Logan Mailloux. Roy was drafted by the Canadiens in the fifth round of the 2021 draft, split time between the Habs and the Rocket last season. Engstrom was a 2022 third round pick, and will be suiting up for his first pro season in North America. He was playing for Rogel BK of the SHL last year, where he had 4 goals and 18 assists in 51 regular season games. Um, Mailloux spent the majority of the 23-24 season with the Rocket, but did get into one game with the Habs where he collected an assist. In 72 games with Laval, Mailloux put up 47 points. And finally, Dobas rejoins the Rockets after spending his entire season there last year. In 51 regular season games with the Rocket, he posted a 24-18-6 record, a 2.93 goals against average, and a 906 save percentage. The Rocket are going to be playing on Friday. Their first game is going to be against the Providence Bruins.
Absolutely. Wild goaltending prospects sent to the ECHL.
So Hunter Jones actually used to be with the Minnesota Wild. He signed with the Montreal Canadiens AHL team and has now been sent down to the Trois-Rivières Lions. He spent 4 years in the Minnesota Wild organization, playing 30 games for the AHL's Iowa Wild and 78 for the Iowa Heartlanders of the ECHL. So he's familiar with both leagues. Um, in 121 career OHL games, Jones actually went 62, 47, and 7 with a 901 save percentage and 7 shutouts for the Peterborough Petes. So the pedigree is there. It's just working your way up through the ranks and getting the opportunities.
The Sens minor leaguer signed.
Yeah. So former Ottawa Senators. Oh, actually, I have the wrong one here. Apologize. Here we go. Got it. Boris Kachuk has been signed to an AHL contract for the 24-25 season. He was on a PTO with the Anaheim Ducks. Kachuk split last season between the Blackhawks and Sens and Rockford Ice Hogs. Had himself 13 points in 59 NHL games and 5 points in 6 AHL games.
We have a retirement from the Senators.
Yeah, former forward and emergency backup goalie. Gentleman by the name of Artem Anisimov. I don't know if you remember him.
Yes.
But he played 771 games in the NHL, had 180 goals and 376 points after playing with the Rangers, Blue Jackets, Blackhawks, and Senators. Last season, Anisimov played for the Hartford Wolfpack, where he played 18 games before being released from his contract in February. He'll probably be best remembered for the night he suited up to be the E-Bug. Near the end of the 2020-2021 season, he was healthy scratched for a game in Vancouver when, Anton Forsberg was already hurt. So Matt Murray started the game, and Marcus Forsberg was his backup. Murray got hurt, as he frequently does. So because Anisimov was a healthy scratch, he threw on the gear and sat down on the bench. So thank goodness he didn't have to play, but at least he was ready to go in.
Well, we probably have the most interesting season so far in quite a few years for the Sens, actually, since they were a competitor for the Stanley Cup and even went to the Stanley Cup. Their new coach, Travis Green, has really raised the expectations in Senatorville, Ottawa.
Yeah, he has a 141, 159, and 35 record, so he's sub 500. But that's he was with Vancouver and the New Jersey Devils. The thing that he's bringing now is more accountability. A lot of coaches these days seem to be content to let their more senior players skate.
Some would
And
suggest
slide.
afraid to make players accountable.
But
Sorry, Eric.
I mean, the biggest challenge that he's got right now is to really improve their defensive structure. They have some issues with that. The Senators and the Flyers both had the worst league save percentage in the NHL at 884. Ottawa was also tied for 26 in the goals against average at 343.
My goodness.
So it's been a bit of a nightmare for them. But the structure that Green is trying to bring in, as well as the fact that he's familiar with some of the players, in particular Adam Gaudette, who Green knows from his time in Vancouver, could lead to big changes in the future. So we'll have to keep an eye on them. And again,
absolutely,
I'm always up for watching their games because they're a lot of fun. So we'll have to see how this develops for them.
Yeah. Well, you're right. And as a person who's been pretty dedicated to following the past couple of years, as much as anyone, and I know a little bit, that they've been a disappointment. And I don't mean this as a negative thing. I mean it as sincere hope has been in Ottawa for the past 3, maybe even 4 seasons. And the team hasn't risen to that hope, which was based on some really good moves that the management team put together and the coaching that they had and the talent that they had. And maybe this is the year with an experienced coach like they do have this year. Whether his record is the best or not isn't relevant. I think what's more important is his experience and how much he's learned and how much maybe he can adapt his coaching to help the Senators improve. I think he's a good coach, and I think they have a lot of talent in that team. And the National Hockey League being what it is, it doesn't really matter what division you go in. Because the Leafs are in that division, everybody goes, "Oh, it's a real tough division." Well, they're all tough, really. I don't think. Yeah, sure. You might be able to say there are divisions that aren't as tough as others, but I think in the Eastern Division, we've learned that all of those teams in the Eastern Division have a real tough road to the Stanley Cup playoffs.
They do. There's no easy games. There's no
No,
nights off.
there isn't. There's some talk about the West because there are a lot of teams that were very weak, but still, we're talking about the East. We're talking about where the Senators are playing, and we're talking about a team that's had a lot of hope. And now they've signed a goaltender, Aaron, in Allmark to a 4-year contract. This guy, they just quietly said, "Okay, come to Ottawa. We'll talk. We'll see how you feel. Have your family come in, spend some time with your family, get into the community, see how you like it, and then we can talk about contract." And it took a while for them to get to that point, to talking contract.
It did. I mean, as it was, they didn't really have to do anything this year. Linus is still under contract from his previous one with the Bruins for another $5 million this season, the 24-25 season. He does become an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season, but of course, Ottawa has now taken care of that with a really generous deal. He's currently looking at 8.25 per from
Wow.
2025 all the way through to the end of the 2029 season.
Wow.
So he's very much looking forward to the fact that he's already integrated himself into the community. Um, you know, it's one of those things where they now have an opportunity to build around a proven performer. He won the Vesna in 2023, so there's experience there. Everybody has a few rough seasons here and there, rough games here and there. I must admit, when he first broke into the league and I was watching him play in the AHL, I was not impressed, but he has rounded into a very good goaltender. So,
Yeah, he went to Buffalo, and Boston did that thing again where they go to a team, get a goaltender from that team, a young goaltender. They did it to the Leafs a few years ago, then they did it to Buffalo, but now it kind of blew up a little bit in their face because they had Swayman as well, and he's being paid. Between the two of them, they're being paid a lot of money. There's no way Boston could have kept both goaltenders.
no, unfortunately, there was too much of a cap crunch there for them to make it
Absolutely.
work.
And I don't know if you can pay a goaltender 8.5 million a year. I don't know, Aaron. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm saying he's not worth it. But we've had very high paid goaltenders who have not played up to their potential. Now we saw one in Florida who spent 90% of his time not playing as well as he should for the kind of money that he earned, and then he spent 10% of his time in the playoffs to help the team win a Stanley Cup. And that's the thing about goaltenders. It's not how well you play forever, it's how well you play when it matters.
Exactly. And I think some of the issues that we're looking at here as well is there aren't that many goalies out there that are getting paid as
That
much as he is.
wow.
Corey Price is basically done. Looking at, I think Sergei Bobrovsky and Vasilevsky, I think might be the other two that are comparable in
Yep,
this particular case.
yep.
But there's not many that are all the way up there like that. I think what people forget though, uh, and speaking as a goalie myself, is they could potentially be worth it because they don't leave the ice for 60 minutes.
Just said it about Bobrovsky. 90%
Mhm.
of the time he's been playing, he was kind of, what are we paying this guy for? And then 10% of the time, which is
Yeah.
basically the playoffs and what, a 20, what's four times 4 rounds, 16 for 16 games. If he plays 16 really good games and he steals 16 games, you get a Stanley Cup.
Yeah. I mean that's really what it boils down to. But I think the problem is you have a lot of guys that basically have kind of tainted the goalie market when it comes to that sort of thing. Because you have guys like Marty
Campbell.
Brodeur saying I'm only going to take $5.5 million and I'll sign for 9 years with the team. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, if I want more money, you're not better than Brodeur, so we're not going to pay you that.
Well, the Leafs
But
the Leafs walked away from Campbell and he went to Edmonton, and
yeah.
We saw that was an experiment that didn't work. And you know, the other thing is, and it's like that for players, every player, it's that way for athletes. You know, it's a very heavy weight to carry a really good contract. You know, getting to the point where you get a really good contract's the easy part. It's playing for that contract that can be
Yeah.
tough for some players.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the mental weight is absolutely
Oh,
unbelievable. So
it's immense. It's
yeah,
immense. And it requires, well, anyway, yeah, a lot of money for a goaltender. They're paying for a goaltender they hope who gets hot in the playoffs, and if he gets hot in the playoffs, he will definitely earn his money for the whole season.
for sure.
Let's talk about the Flames, and they're looking for stability. How are they doing that?
Well, they've been rebuilding, retooling, and revamping to sort of make everything better. Calgary finished 38, 39, and 5 last season. That's 17 points out of a playoff spot, which was, but they've been trying to get younger. They've been trying to get a little bit faster in an effort to try to do it. The What they've basically been trying to do is find younger players who are looking to make a name for themselves to pack around some of the already established players that they have, like Kadri and Backlund and whatnot. The unfortunate thing is Yegor Sharangovich is on injured reserve with a lower body injury, but that means that more opportunities are going to come to guys like Matt Coronado, Samuel Honzek, Connor Zary. Not only that. Dan Vladar and Dustin Wolf are now fighting for starts after Jacob Markstrom left the team. Plus, Kevin Ball, Jake Bean, and Tyson Berry are now settling in on the defense. So,
Absolutely.
it's all wanting to establish yourself and trying to set a good record and good precedent that I think is going to drive this team forward.
Yeah, and you know what? The Flames were a heavier team, and now they're trying to go the opposite direction of the Maple Leafs. You notice?
Yeah.
They were more and I guess I'm saying that for a reason. Wink, wink, dependent on the general manager and his feeling what it takes to win. So yeah, it'll be interesting. They lost a pretty good player in Schwint to Vegas. Vegas once again picks off a young good player off a team. They've done it a few times, and they're a team that argues with the cap. So it's important to them that they do stuff like that, find these little jewels for a lot less money.
No, it's true with a team as hard up against the cap as the Knights have been. This is an unfortunate loss for Calgary, a potential benefit for Vegas, but at the same time, Jacob Peltier and Devin Cooley both cleared waivers, so at least the Flames managed to retain them. Schwint had 36 points in 66 AHL games last season, but was pointless in 4 games with the Flames. So I'm not 100% sure if they'll be able to turn that into anything good. But at the same time, the Golden Knights, I think, were trying to make the move because they lost Zach Aston Reese to the Columbus Blue Jackets on waivers. At the same time, they also picked up Raphael Lavoie from the Edmonton Oilers. So there's a lot of transactions going on here um, for lower. I hesitate to say lower grade because they're all excellent hockey players, but I guess players lower on the notoriety and visibility scale to try to fill certain needs that they may have.
But they have to fit into that number of contracts a team
Yeah,
can have.
exactly. So you're moving stuff around to try to best maximize the 50 contract slots that you do have.
Whatever those contracts are, do you have the guys that you hope will enhance the starting lineup at some point? Because that's who these players are. These are players who you hope will enhance the team at a certain point when the team needs it the most. Injuries, that kind of thing. These are the players. These players that they're doing. We've talked about this before. These are the players that are call ups, right? These are
Yeah.
players, emergency call ups or otherwise, that are necessary, and they speak to a word in sports that's really important and is quoted a lot, and that is depth.
hmm Which
Let's
is
talk about. Okay, sorry, man.
I was going to say it's just that's that magical thing that everybody wants, but not everybody has, and that's depth. So
Absolutely. So the Winnipeg Jets have a new coach. He comes from their lineup, former player, retired, now working with the organization, and now works as its coach, Scott Arniel.
yeah, he was hired after Bonus retired at the end of last season. He was an associate coach the past 2 seasons and went 15-7-3, filling in during Bonus's absence last season for family or health reasons. Um, Now, Winnipeg's first round loss to Colorado in 5 games last spring came after the team finished fourth overall in the NHL with a 52-24-6 record. Um, but it's one of those things where Arneal has seen the coaching style. He knows the systems. He knows the players that are already in the system. So it's a little bit easier for him to work with going forward. And getting a sustainable, strong play style out of that should be a little bit easier for him.
Absolutely, and good for them. Tell me about a former Oiler who's being given a new challenge.
Uh, yeah. The, uh, Sorry, give me a second here. Not only was Jessica Campbell introduced as the first woman to coach in an NHL game, but also Jordan Eberle is the second ever captain of the franchise, um, taking over after Mark Giordano left the team. They had been without a captain for a significant period of time. So it was good to see Jordan Eberle as the second ever captain. He's got the right temperament for the job. He's very calm and collected. He knows his limits, but he also knows how to push his teammates to try to get the most out of them. So
Absolutely. Oilers signed Dermott. We talked about it, and they placed Kane on that LTIR thing that we talked about earlier.
well, Kane did actually have 2 procedures last month for his sports hernia. So there's no firm timeline set. Having gone through a hernia procedure myself, I can confirm that it can sometimes take longer than expected. Dermott had 7 points over 50 games with the Arizona Coyotes last season. He's entering his eighth NHL season. His contract is actually not going to be too detrimental for them. It's a two-way deal with an AAV of 775. So if they do deem that his conduct is or his play is not where it needs to be, you can always bury it in the AHL with the Bakersfield Condors. So I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue. It's just a question of making sure that they deploy him in the right fashion to maximize the value for him.
Absolutely. Let's go to the Leafs, and Wall is out for Leafs homer. Aaron.
I so yeah. No, Joseph Wall was actually complaining about lower body tightness on Tuesday, and as a result, they're going to keep him out just strictly for precautionary reasons. Dennis Hildeby, in the meantime, has been called up as the backup goaltender. The Canadiens are going to be starting Montembeault and Caden Primo in just about 9 minutes. Uh, that start is getting close. Um, but yeah, Stolarz joined the Leafs off free agency. Woll had a 905 save percentage last year. Stolarz had a 925. We'll see if they'll fight it out once he gets better.
And the problem that we had with Wall was the question about his health. He didn't make it to the start of the season, Aaron.
I know. Trust me, dude, it's killing me.
Oh my God! Well, thank God they've got Stolarz. He was impressive. You know, this isn't nobody. You won't hear anybody say, "Oh no, they got to go to the backup," because Stolarz. I don't think anybody after that preseason watching Wall play and watching Stolarz play. I don't think there was that much difference, and I think Stolarz was a pretty good player, a pretty good goaltender.
No, he's always been very consistent. It's just one of those things. Uh, Perception, I guess, gets tainted because of where a player comes from.
Well, yeah, and don't forget he's new to the Maple Leafs and their fan base. But if one does a little bit of research and understands statistically, oh my God, this sounds like a Dubas story. Statistically, he really was the best goaltender in the National Hockey League who played a minimum amount of games.
Yeah,
Best
I mean,
goaltender.
he had a 925 last season playing with the Florida Panthers. He had an 899 when he played with the Ducks, which was brutal. But he also had the season prior to his 899 season, also had a 917 and a 920 season. So, the ability is there. It's just a question now of making sure that it's sustainable over the long run for the Leafs.
Leafs signed the former Shark.
Yeah. So that's Steven Lorentz earned himself a 1 year, $775,000 deal. He was originally attending training camp. There we go, on a PTO. Last season, former Sharks winger Noah Gregor got the same thing. and got himself a 1 year contract. He's now with another team.
Former Habs captain Pacioretty signs with the Leafs. We talked
I know
about.
we covered this on Monday, but I wanted to just come back and touch on this contract again. There is actually a performance bonus in there. If he manages to stick in the lineup for 10 games, he gets $312,000. And if he manages to stick in the lineup for 35 games, he gets an additional $312,000. So that is a nice little bit of pocket change for him. Um, so yeah, hopefully he'll return to his previous form. But for $873,770, I believe he's worth it.
We talked about LTIR, and it had impact on how the Leafs shuffled their starting lineup.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you're definitely trying to maximize and make space for that sort of thing. So on top of signing Pacioretty, Cade Weber, and Lorentz, the Leafs also placed Connor Dewar on injured reserve, as well as Fraser Minton, Callie Yarncroke, Dakota Mermis, and Yanni Hakanpää. So all of those guys will now clear a little bit of room. For anybody that's placed on injured reserve, it's a minimum of 10 games that they won't be able to play for this particular season. But based on the AAV and everything else that comes together on this, that means that the Leafs can massage their cap situation a little bit to make things a little bit easier for themselves.
And when the trading deadline passes
Well, there's that too.
and the playoffs start. Let's talk about some line combinations, Aaron, for the Leafs.
For sure. So at practice this morning, we were looking at Nyes, Matthews, and Marner on the first line. Domi, Tavares, and Nylander on the second. No surprises there. Pacioretty will be lining up on Pontus Holmberg's left with Nicholas Robertson on the right. And Steve Lorentz, David Camp, and Ryan Reeves will be rounding out the fourth line. And that fourth line does not look like it's going to be any fun to play against. I am very much looking forward to that. You've got Riley and Tanev. Those were a more consistent pair for them during the preseason. I'm liking the fact that they're coupling Morgan with Tanev because Tanev can move the puck really well. That should complement Riley. Oliver Ekman-Larsson is paired up with Jake McCabe, and Simone Benoit and Connor Timmins rounding out the third pairing. Is that's just 14 foot worth of pain on the back end right there. So I'm looking to see how everything works out in that regard.
Aaron, thanks for doing this, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Hey, always glad to be here, Frank. You know it's a hoot.
Absolutely. He's Aaron William Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching Candid Frank Live, Aaron, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 6 p.m. Fridays, we'll be back to Leaf Talk. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For Candid Frank Live, other news, entertainment, and sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, live it. Thanks for watching, everybody, and ciao for now.